The Catholic Morning Show.
Welcome back to Iowa Catholic Radio. 17 minutes after the hour, and we are grateful you're making the Catholic Morning Show a part of your day. I'm your host, Bo Bonner. Matt's got the news covered. Ayden and Alexia checking the weather and the boards. You're listening. We're glad you are here. Second half of the show, we will be speaking with Sister Carolyn Nunes, Vocation Director for the Sisters of St. Francis of the Martyr St. George. Right now, let's turn to our first interview of the day. We have Dr. Carrie Gress. She is a scholar at the Institute for Human Ecology at Catholic University of America. Her new book, Something Wicked, Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity. Dr. Carrie, thank you for coming on the Catholic Morning Show.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Something Wicked, of course, some brilliant marketing with things that are in the movies and everything like this. But tell us what the book's about and how it came into being, along with the work you've done elsewhere.
Sure. Well, this is my third book on the issue of feminism, and the first one was about 10 years ago and was just a very Catholic book. And then 2 years ago, I published a book called The End of Woman, which was very secular. But I realized in both of those books, I never fundamentally or decisively said feminism and Christianity cannot work together. And so this book was really that, the final stake in the heart of feminism, just demonstrating that feminism comes from a totally different DNA than Christianity does, and that needed to be exposed instead of really continuing to confuse people about what feminism is in the way that people believe that it somehow can work with Christianity and specifically with Catholicism. So it's it's been an amazing journey, and I think obviously a lot of uphill swimming, climbing, but I think people are beginning to see the light, and the conversation has changed significantly over the last 10 years, that's for sure.
Now, on one hand, of course, words sort of drift in meaning all over the place. So, feminism, insofar as it can just be seen as being positive to women, is not what you're after. What you get to in the book is a sort of historical point of the history of how this concept comes about. So maybe for people who are unfamiliar with that, if you could give us some of that historical background.
Absolutely. So, I think this is one of the hard things is that people just have used the term feminism to just mean being pro-woman, and that's one of the ways in which feminism has really hid its roots is by, people making it look like something very benign. But in fact, it actually is something very definitively focused on ending Christianity. It started with a bunch of women who were actually Unitarians, so they didn't believe in the divinity of Christ. And they really believed that Christianity was a tool used by men to try to enslave women. And from there, that's where it started. And then as time passed, it became further and further connected with communism. And then, of course, we know it in our own day where it's incredibly destructive. It's really the fuel behind abortion. And, none of these things really coincide well with Christianity because it's focused on power and control instead of what we know Christianity to be organized around, which is obviously Christ is our Savior, but also that idea of gift of self, of humility, of all those incredible virtues that Christianity has taught for, millennia.
Well, and I think one of the interesting things, as far as a wedge to drive into some of these connections we make, you point out that there's one. You talk about a shadow church that starts to have new idols, new commands, things like this. Mm-hmm. But in the heart of this is to talk about that the idol is autonomy and the sacred rite is work. And so these sort of ideas are coming about right in the sort of big economic shifts after the Industrial Revolution, where work and money and things like this, for all humans, is taking on a significance higher than something like, religion and place. But particularly, then you say, with these ideologies, those become idols, sacraments, and a gospel on its own.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, that was one of the fascinating things was if you look at the movement itself and kind of the major players and what it was that they're espousing, it really is this idea of female autonomy that becomes this idol of the movement. And you can see this in the way that women behave today. We're so focused on our careers and earning money. And, this is why abortion is such a requirement because having children and our fertility becomes a real obstacle to trying to be autonomous. The goal is to make women more like men and less like women. So you see this prioritization of work and the denigration, really, of motherhood and certainly of the home.
And in that regard, when you think about something like Pope Leo the 13th and the social encyclicals, one of the things, of course, like very much talking about the conditions of labor. He's talking about unions. But I think people sometimes forget how many encyclicals where he talked specifically about family, motherhood, and the new inability for families to gain traction. And this is exactly the sort of historical time period where this is fomenting into the story that you talk about in your book.
Yeah. No, and that's one of the amazing things was what I was able to find, even from an American cardinal talking about what was then called the women's movement, where he's denouncing it and saying, in the Ladies' Home Journal in 1902, Cardinal Gibbons is talking about this very thing, and he was friends with Leo the 13th. They had very similar ideas and published them simultaneously. But the point he was trying to make in the Ladies' Home Journal was that we're creating this restless kind of woman who's prioritizing the masculine over motherhood, and the damage that it's going to do to civilization, it's almost unspeakable. It's so beyond what anybody could imagine, and I think that's what we're living out now is 3,000 abortions in America alone. There's between 40 to 70 million abortions worldwide every year. So this ideology has really taken hold certainly in the Western imagination, and I think this is what's creating obviously so many problems beyond abortion. It's led to human trafficking. It's the incredible rift between men and women, that sexual divide. So we can see that the way that feminism has really fueled these things, and certainly Pope Leo the 13th and others were very prescient and anticipated a lot of these problems because they could just see the way human nature works and follow it out to its logical extension.
Well, and that gets us, of course, to today, and that by the time you have 100+ years of a social category to talk about this way, like you point out, that gave rise in this time period, and now it becomes hard to go back and look at it, as it were, with critical eyes, like you're saying, because if you, as you say, if you soft pedal the word to mean anything positive about women, it gets hard to extricate the specific theory from just like people's popular imagination. Is that one of the issues you find in talking about this, in doing this research, that it's kind of hard to peel back the layers, as it were?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a lot like trying to say communism was just about helping workers. You end up confusing the issues entirely and kind of glossing over what the real problems are. So I think that's, just an important step. There's a lot of people who will define it in different ways, but if you look at what the leadership is saying, that's really where there's very clear problems. And, at the heart of it, too, even if women say they're feminists and they're pro-life, the problem is that feminism fundamentally sets up these categories where women are victims and men and the patriarchy are fundamentally bad. They are the victimizers. Those are very Marxian categories. And so that's the problem with even trying to shift the word, is it presupposes that there's this victimhood reality of womanhood that needs to be fixed. But we don't have words that imply that same meaning for men, and we certainly don't have it for children. So I think abolishing the word altogether is going to go a long way in terms of just clearing up the confusion and putting the family and really male and female back in the order in which John Paul II writes about it beautifully, and the way in which we need to move forward as Christians.
Yeah, and that's actually what I was going to bring up next. Is so you have, of course, a chapter on Pope John Paul II's new feminism, and you talk about how that's a watershed moment that, as it were, resets the terms of the debate about how we should be talking about it now.
Yeah, no, he writes beautifully about it, and he corrects many of the errors of all of feminism, including the first wave feminists and the errors in their thinking. And the problem is we haven't really stuck to that. There's been an effort to sort of interject first wave feminist ideas into what John Paul II was doing, and of course they're totally incongruous. They really cannot be fit together. So that, I think, could be an incredibly important way to move forward, is to drop the language of feminism. After all, John Paul only used it himself 3 times that we're aware of in his 26-year pontificate, which is, hardly a resounding endorsement of the movement. But he was very focused on womanhood, both in his encyclicals and then, of course, in the theology of the body. So I think he offers us a way forward with some incredibly beautiful and compelling, understanding of womanhood. And he demonstrates very easily that feminism doesn't need to be a part of the discussion. Where it doesn't need to be a crutch. It's not Christianity doesn't need an ideology on top of it in order to make sense of something so fundamental and beautiful and important as womanhood. Especially because we have the models of Our Lady, but we also have this deep ecclesiology where we understand the church itself as female, as feminine, as the bride of Christ, and Christ as the bridegroom. Those things are built into our faith and are not social constructs. So we've got an incredible amount to work with, and there's really no need for us to tap into someone like Mary Wollstonecraft or Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
So if people, of course, are interested in this book, it's out, obviously, Something Wicked, Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity. But as you said, you've had 2 prior books, and then, of course, you've also done a lot of work that people can find online and places like this. So if people are intrigued and they want to learn more about your work and what you've been saying in your research, where can they go find more of your work?
Yeah, the best place is either Carrie Gress at Instagram or theologyofhome.com, which is my website where people can get signed copies, and all of my books are available there, or carriegress.com has a library of a lot of the articles and work I've done over the last decade.
Absolutely wonderful. The book, one more time, Something Wicked, Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity, out from Sophia Institute Press. Dr. Carrie Gress, thank you for coming on the Catholic Morning Show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Listen to the Catholic Morning Show weekdays at 7 a.m. on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, iowacatholicradio.com, or the Iowa Catholic Radio app.